If you've been searching for that one grinder that can truly do both espresso and filter without compromises, then this review is for you. This is the Ditting 807 Lab Suite, a machine that represents the end game for many of us. It's the one device that could stop the constant search for something better. Today, we'll find out if it truly delivers, pushing it to the limits with everything from silky Turkish coffee to a championship pour-over. We'll be dialing in espresso, testing the filter performance and breaking down the daily workflow and noise. We're also going to have a big talk about retention, because let me tell you, it's not zero, but it can be, and we'll show you exactly how. We'll also briefly look at how it stacks up against some of other big names in the endgame grinder world. And finally, we'll answer the biggest question of all: can this one machine honestly replace 2 or even 3 grinders in your setup? And the key to understanding what makes these grinders so special is hidden in its somewhat strange Lab Suite moniker. That name isn't just marketing, it's the entire philosophy of the machine, and it all comes down to the burrs. In fact, there is a bit of legend about how they were chosen. As the story goes, Ditting ran a series of internal blind taste copings to find the best tasting burrs they had ever produced. After rounds of testing, one set from an old, forgotten model stood out: the 80mm cast steel burrs. They consistently produced the sweetest, most balanced flavor, so Ditting built their new grinder at the time, the 804, around them. And that's how the Lab Suite was born. But this isn't just a nice story, that championship pedigree is very real. The Ditting Lab Suite was the official grinder for the World Brewers Cup in 2019 and 2021, proving its reputation for filter coffee. But here's the real twist. The Lagom Peak, a top-tier espresso grinder used by World Barista Championship finalists, was already using these exact same burrs. So it turns out that a set of world-class espresso burrs were later discovered by Ditting to be just as incredible for filter coffee. That's what makes these grinders so special and so rare. So, knowing all that, you'd think buying one would be a no-brainer. But that's what led us to the story of how this grinder ended up on our bench. It all started for our editor, Alex, in 2021. It was a strange year, and with many of us spending more time at home, a lot of people were getting deeper into their coffee hobby. And there is a good chance that if you were looking for a new grinder back then, you came across the brand new Endgame grind series from James Hoffman. And if you got excited and actually tried to get one of the grinders he featured, you quickly discovered a huge problem. The top contenders were, and still are, either sold out or have long wait lists. And it was even worse if you weren't in the US, because on top of all that, you had to deal with high shipping costs and import taxes, making the price truly eye-watering. The only other real option on the table was the Melkonen EK43, but its profile was massive, and based on various tests, the retention was still quite big. It was never a practical choice for home setup in a small Italian kitchen. And then, quite unexpectedly, Ditting upgraded their legendary 804 model and released this, the 807 Lab Suite. It was redesigned to be more modern, more compact, and a lot more visually appealing. The industrial look was toned down, and the burr chamber had less empty space, making it a much better potential solution for home use. So here was the dilemma. We knew the burrs inside were legendary, but the grinder itself was a complete unknown. Would the new body and design work well for home use? That was the gamble, but the pitch was just too good to ignore. It was actually in stock, the price was steep but not impossible, and it promised those world-class burrs in a package that would actually fit on the home counter. So here it is. Alright, now let's take a closer look at what we've got. The build quality is excellent. The body is fully metal and powder coated. It's a sleek, modern improvement over its predecessor, the 804, and looks great next to machines like a Lilith Bianca. Most people won't even recognize it as a coffee grinder, which makes for a fun conversation piece. The user interface is dead simple: a main power switch and a single button to grind. That's it. Physically, it's tall and heavy, but its footprint is surprisingly compact. In fact, as you can see from these side-by-side photos, it can fit into the same footprint as more typical home grinders, like a Barista 270 or Eureka Mignon. If you have the vertical space for it and the weight isn't an issue, it can fit even into a small kitchen. The hopper has a safety switch that ensures the grinder won't start unless the hopper is pushed all the way in. There is also a screw to lock the hopper firmly in place, but for home use it really isn't necessary. Leaving it unscrewed makes removing the hopper for cleaning much faster. A great detail is that bins never stick to the sides, even with RDT, thanks for the well-designed shape, the tall profile and probably a little bit of vibration from the powerful motor. For space, you'll need about 45-50 centimeters of vertical clearance for a small single-dose hopper and at least 60 centimeters for the stock hopper. If you want to save space and don't feel like going the DIY road, Prima Coffee has you covered. They offer a ready-made small hopper that also comes with a dedicated portafilter fork, which is a great upgrade if you're mainly doing espresso. You can even buy the grinder directly from them with this setup already equipped instead of the stock hopper, and because the price is the same, it won't cost you anything extra. One of the most useful features is this height-adjustable, foldable and completely removable stand. You can set it to whatever height you need, which is incredibly useful. You can place the included catch cup on it, put your V60 directly under the chute to grind for pour-over, or even use it for your portafilter. We've tested a few different espresso workflows. Grinding into the included catch cup works perfectly. If you want to grind directly into your portafilter, you can do that too, but it's best to use a separate portafilter stand or even just a folded towel on top of the shelf. This gives you a secure, hands-free setup. A little tip: if you use a metal stand, put a small piece of tape on the back to prevent metal-on-metal contact and reduce vibration noise. Overall, the workflow for espresso is great. Unlike many grinders that only work nicely with a standard 58mm E61 portafilter, this system doesn't discriminate. You can use pretty much anything you want, 54, 51, even 49mm. Just put a funnel on top, which you'll probably use for WDT anyway, so it's clean and hassle-free. If you are using a blind shaker, you can place it directly on the stand and grind right into it. You can also use scales on the tray if you want to double-check your doughs after grinding. Just put a little piece of double-sided tape under the scale to lock it in place if you plan to use it regularly. Also, the magnetic drip tray is a great addition that makes the cleaning process much easier. It doubles as a handy little parking spot for a wet spoon or puck screen. Then there is a power cable. It's not quickly replaceable, you can't just unplug it. Of course, if you're comfortable with some minor disassembly, you can change it in about 5 minutes. But it would have been a nicer touch to have a quick swap cable, especially if you wanted a shorter one for a clean setup or needed easily replace a damaged one. Okay, before we get into the grinding performance, a quick word about alignment and seasoning. After the initial seasoning with 5 kilos of coffee, the alignment was good, so we didn't shim the burrs. We just recalibrated the 0 point so the burrs barely touch at the finest setting. It's an easy process that takes about 1 minute. This means for all the tests you're about to see, we're using a fully seasoned and calibrated grinder. Now, with that set up, let's talk about the dial itself. It's solid and allows for relatively fine stepless adjustments, but the numbers on it go from 01 to 12, which makes it slightly awkward to address grind settings that fall between the mark. For example, there is no standard callout for a setting between 01 and 02. You could call it 01.5 or 01.5, but that isn't very convenient for logging or sharing settings. So we are going to propose a system to treat 01 as 10, 02 as 20 and so on. This gives you a smooth scale from 10 to 120, which is much easier to log and recall. We'll use this format for the rest of the video. Alright, now for the main event, the espresso dialing in performance. For the consistency, we're using our Gadget Classic set to 9 bars of pressure with a PID controller to ensure the temperature is stable between shots. We're using 20 grams of coffee, which is typical dose for a double basket. We started at the setting of 24. It was quite fast, 40 grams out in just 24 seconds. The shot was still drinkable, but nowhere near as good as it could be. So, we knew we needed to go finer. We moved the stepless dial down to 23. This was better, about 3 seconds slower, giving us 27-second shot. It was way better, but for the sake of experiment, we went one step further to 22. This gave us much slower shot, 40 grams in 38 seconds, which was also quite good and enjoyable. We repeated this test 2 more times to check consistency and got the same time on both tries. This shows that the grinder is consistent, and it also highlights its usable espresso range and granularity. If you are already very close to your desired time, you might only need to move the dial half a line to get it perfect. It's possible to dial in with great precision. What's really nice is that this grinder has a very wide sweet spot. Unlike cheaper grinders where you have to hit a 28-second shot perfectly, here you can get tasty, enjoyable shots across a huge range from 20 seconds all the way to 40. They will taste different, but they won't be undrinkable. The same goes for your ratio. You have a lot of room to play without getting a bad cup. So after dialing in our espresso, we wanted to see just how fine this grinder could really go. To test its absolute limit, we set the dial right to our 0 point and ground just 10 grams of coffee into a single dose basket. The result? We got a super slow output, about 20 grams of liquid in 100 seconds. It was right on the edge of completely choking the machine. We moved it a little coarser and it was still slow, around 90 seconds. It wasn't until we got to a setting of 15 or 16 that we got a more manageable 60-second shot. This shows that the grinder can go incredibly fine, which is great for single dose and specialty light roasts that can be very demanding. This also made us very optimistic about its performance for Turkish coffee, which often needs a grind that's even finer than espresso. For this test, we ground 20 grams on the finest setting. The grinder handled it with no problems at all, no stalling, no stopping, no overheating. The consistency was excellent. It was powdery and even finer than the store-bought Mehmet Efendi pre-ground coffee. We then made 3 cups using electric Turkish coffee maker, and the result was really nice and enjoyable. This is one of the few electric grinders that can truly handle Turkish coffee, and it does it very well. And now for the champion's territory, pour over. Given that this grinder was used in the World Brewers Cup, it should obviously be excellent for filter coffee, but we had to test it for ourselves just to show you the whole process. For our test, we used Lance Hedrick's ultimate pour-over recipe. We used 20 grams of coffee to 300 milliliters of water, so 1:15 ratio, with the water at 88 degrees Celsius. The method starts with a 60-gram bloom with some agitation, followed by 1-minute pause. After that, it's one single continuous pour until you hit 300 grams on the scale. At a grind setting of 65, the total brew time was 2 minutes and 40 seconds, which is right in the sweet spot for a fantastic pour-over. So after testing all these different brewing styles, we can conclude that the usable range is massive. You can go from Turkish as a setting of 10 to espresso in the 15-25 range and all the way up to pour-over around 60 to 70. And you still have plenty of room in the coarser range for things like chemics, French press or even cold brew. And what's really nice is how quickly you can switch between any of these settings. It's just one smooth turn of the dial. It's a lot like on this Espresso Key Plus. I can go from espresso to filter, back to espresso and back to filter again. The Ditting's dial gives you that same kind of immediate, satisfying control. After all the tests and numbers, we get to the million-dollar question. How does the coffee actually taste? Over the last few years of using this grinder, we found the results to be consistently pleasant, enjoyable and balanced. No matter the brew ratio, from tight Ristrettos to Lungus. The signature profile is one of exceptional clarity and sweetness. Think of it like the difference between standard TV and 4K screen. With other grinders you get a good picture, but with the Lab suite you see every single detail clearly, like pulling apart different layers of flavor instead of them being muddled together. The sweetness is also very genuine, giving you a smooth finish without the harsh bitterness you can get from other grinders. It's a very clean and refined taste. Now, we'll be the first to admit our palates might not be a professional Q grade or level. So if you want a real technical deep dive, you should check out the excellent content from Quan and Fabian. In fact, their excellent analysis was a huge part of why we felt confident taking the leap of faith on this grinder. We highly recommend checking out their work on the older 804 model. It uses the same burrs, so the test profile is identical. So with the 807 you are getting the same world-class taste, but in a modern package that's even better for daily home use. Okay, so before we can properly talk about retention and switching between grind settings, we need to start with a clean grinder. And thankfully, cleaning this machine is just a ridiculously easy procedure. You just slide the hopper back slightly, lift it off, and loosen 3 screws about the burrs. After that, the whole top burr assembly comes right off. The declumper is just sitting there, so you can simply lift it out with your hand for a quick clean. It's fast, tool-free, and a huge contrast to grinders like the DF64, where you practically have to disassemble the entire machine just to get to it. The stock declumper works so well that you'll never feel the need to buy or 3D print a different one. Now for retention. We started with a clean grinder and put in 50.6 grams of beans. Out came 48.8 grams, meaning about 1.8 grams stayed inside. As you can see here, we put in equivalent of 50 grams, and only 48 grams came out, so 2 are left behind. To show you what's happening, we're using these little chocolate candies as a visual proxy. Just imagine each one represents a gram of coffee. But what happens on the next grind? For that, we put in 20 grams of fresh coffee. If you watch here, you'll see we still got 20 grams out, but one of those grams is from the previous batch. This shows us that the grinder exchanges about 1 gram of coffee with each dose, while another gram or so stays stuck in tight spaces like screw holes. So what does this mean when you switch from espresso to filter? Well, if you just change the setting and grind, you'll get more coffee out than you put in, about 22 grams. That's because the wider burr gap releases all those fine particles that were stuck. This isn't terrible, but we can do better. A simple trick is to first switch to your filter setting and then run the grinder empty for a second. As you can see, about 1 gram of old espresso fines will come out. Now, when you grind your 20 gram dose, you'll get about 21 grams out, which is much better. For the absolute cleanest cup, you can use a few sacrificial beans. Grind about 5 grams at your new coarser setting. This will push out almost all of the old espresso fines. After that, your next 20 gram dose will come out as exactly 20 grams. Going the other way from filter back to espresso is a bit different. Your grinder is mostly empty. If you put 20 grams in, you'll only get about 18 grams out, because 2 grams will get stuck in the chamber. That shot will run a bit fast, but it's still perfectly usable, especially for milk drinks. The simple solution: just add 2 extra grams to your first dose. As you can see here, we put 22 grams in and we get our perfect 20 gram dose out. So, once you know these simple techniques, the workflow is fantastic. One last minor quirk is that the stock hopper doesn't have a shut-off gate, so you have to drop your beans into already spinning burrs. Alright. Let's talk about the engine room of this grinder, the day-to-day experience of its speed and sound. For a home grinder, this thing is as fast as you could ever want it to be. A 20 gram dose for espresso is done in about 4 or 5 seconds. Honestly, you'll spend more time doing your puck prep than you will waiting for the coffee to grind. Even if you're making a big batch of filter coffee, it chews through 50 grams in about 10 seconds flat. This is a huge difference from many boutique home grinders that use low RPM motors, augers, or other slow feed systems. There is really no practical reason to need anything faster at home. Now for the noise. When the grinder is on but empty, it's really quiet, just the burrs spinning. When you add beans, it's not silent, but the sound it makes is a deep industrial hum rather than a high-pitched whine. It's actually quite pleasant and comparable to grinders that have silent technology, like an Eureka Mignon. And finally, let's talk about power and cooling. The powerful motors chews through dense, light roasted beans without ever stalling. It's rated at a normal 700 watts, and in our testing it usually hovered around 500 watts. This is important if you're planning to use it in a mobile setup, like a coffee cart or a van, where you need to design your battery system accordingly. But the real standout feature here is the active cooling system. 2 internal fans keep the motor cool, which is something you just don't find on most home grinders. This isn't just for long-term durability, it has a huge practical benefit. It means you can be this designated coffee guy for your friends. You can grind half a kilo or even a full kilo of beans for them without worrying about the grinder overheating. It's another sign that this is a true commercial machine, just in a home-friendly package. So, how does the Lab Suite stack up against other options? Let's break down a few ways you could approach this. First, you have the other big single grinder solutions like the Weber EG1 or the Monolith Flat. These are fantastic machines, but they're often even pricier than the Ditting, especially in Europe. The one real alternative that has become more available recently is the Lagom 01. It costs about the same as a Ditting, a little less in the US, a little more in Europe, and it's also a massive, powerful grinder with low retention and an easy workflow. It has some nice quality of life features like RPM control and magnetic accessories, but it's not as fast as a Ditting. And it's also very big and quite loud. They have very different design philosophies. The Ditting is a square boy, just like a buffed black SpongeBob, and the other has more a rounded trash can Mac Pro kind of vibe. Your personal preference will make the choice an easy one. Just looking at the pictures, you've probably already picked a side. Your second option is to buy 2 separate mass-market grinders, say a DF83 for espresso and Timor Sculptor for filter. This works. And it's convenient not to switch settings, but you are taking up double the counter space, creating more mess and doing twice the maintenance. It's a less elegant solution, and the grinders, while good, might feel less refined. A third option is a great espresso grinder like a Melkonin E80 Supreme, plus a hand grinder like Comandante for Turkish or one Espresso for filter. This is very space-saving setup, but if you brew Turkish coffee daily, hand grinding becomes a serious chore. This is where the Ditting Lab Suite shines. It's the only option that hits all the targets: espresso, filter and Turkish, with one device and no real compromises. It avoids the complexity, the clutter, the manual labor of the alternative, shipping with its best legendary configuration right out of the box. So, after watching all this, the big question is for you. Would you put this grinder in your kitchen? Is it overkill or is it just right? Maybe you've owned one and moved on to something else. If so, let us know what you got instead. Or maybe you consolidated 2 or 3 grinders into this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. To wrap things up, let's do a quick summary. Of course, no grinder is perfect. The 807 is still big, heavy and expensive. It would be nice a smaller hopper with a slider were included. The power cable isn't quickly replaceable, and if you switch in brew methods constantly, the workflow requires a little thought. But the upsides are huge. The versatility is amazing. The taste is incredible, with tons of clarity and sweetness. It's built like a tank. It's fast, easy to clean and has commercial-grade cooling. It's a grinder that just works and will grow with you, no matter what you throw at it. As for us, for the past few years, it's been a fantastic grinder that has served us very well. If it weren't for this channel, our search could easily end right here. But our goal is to keep exploring, to test more machines, and to share that we discover with you. That's why your support is so important. If you like our style and want to see us continue on this journey, please subscribe, hit the like button, and drop a comment to let us know what you like to see next. Thanks for watching, and remember, a clever goose doesn't look at the clock. So see you in the next one.